Hello everybody, it's Lisa and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be kind of a bit different from what I normally do. I try to keep my channel a pretty positive and happy place. Obviously, when you're talking about books, you're not going to love every single book you read. So that is what this video is. I'm going to be talking about my most disappointing books that I read in 2019. So the reason I decided to make this a disappointing books instead of like the worst books of 2019 is because some of these books I didn't hate them, but I was disappointed in one way or the other. A few of these books are actually 3-star reads, which is not a bad rating, but for some reason they were disappointing to me or not. So I didn't want to make a worst books of 2019 because that seems kind of dramatic. But yeah, I have 6 books to talk about, which in the grand scheme of things, I feel like it could have been a lot worse. So I'm just going to get right into it and start with the first book. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Karvall by Stephanie Garber. And I think I gave this a 3-star when I originally read it, but I think if I had to reevaluate, it might be more of like a 2.5. I know that isn't the biggest difference, but I feel like a 3-star is a bit generous because I don't feel like this book did anything crazy or unique. A lot of the time it is compared to The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, which I have not read. Don't come for me. That is a plan in the new year. I want to read her books in the new year. So hopefully I can get to them and then maybe help with that comparison. But I've heard from people, it's really not that similar. I think there's a circus in both. And so therefore it makes the comparison. But it does actually kind of remind me like if Alice in Wonderland took place in a circus. That's kind of the vibe I got, which sounds great and sounds like something I would enjoy, but it just wasn't anything unique. The characters were just okay. They weren't anything memorable. They weren't anything that I've never seen before. I also think that the world was interesting, but we didn't get enough of it like explained. And I think a part of the story was the fact that it was so mysterious and we weren't really sure what was going to happen next. But I feel like a lot of the magic and just the way that this world worked was not explained, and I was kind of confused. I definitely thought it was an interesting world. I just wish that we kind of understood more about it and how it all worked and kind of what made sense and what didn't, because there was no explanation for anything. So it was just kind of like anything goes. And I would definitely say that this isn't like the book I was most disappointed in this year. But I did want to mention it because I had been waiting for this book or to read this book for a really long time. When did this book come out? I think it came out in 2016, but I could be mistaken. So it actually came out at the beginning of 2017. So I was close enough, but I've been waiting to read this book pretty much since it came out because the concept and what happened in it always interested me. I always thought it sounded really interesting. And then I actually got this book as a birthday gift from my friend Franny. So Franny, I'm sorry that I didn't like one of the books that I technically picked out for myself that you sent to me. I still really appreciate the gift. I still appreciate that you got this for me. I just think that it was something that I had been hyping up kind of in my head. It wasn't a book that clearly I was like so excited to read that I needed to read it the instant it came out, but it was one that I had seen in Barnes & Noble and kind of just on the internet for a couple years now, and I just was excited to get to it finally, and it didn't live up to what I was hoping it would be. Alright, so the next book I don't actually have with me, so I will put up a picture right here or wherever editing Lisa feels like putting it, but that book is The Devourer by Christine Lynn Herman. I gave this a 3-star, but again, like, I don't really feel like the ratings are necessarily reflective of my disappointment. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm going to say the ratings anyway. But I gave it 3 stars, and I just found that this book was insanely average. I feel like this was a book that so many people were talking about, and even though I didn't feel like I had heard that much about it, I knew that the people that did read it liked it. I think a lot of people gave it like 4 stars. And also the comparison to Stranger Things was really what I think set my expectations really high, because I love Stranger Things. If you're not new to this channel, you probably know that by now, but I just love Stranger Things. So to have something be compared to my favorite show, I was like, oh, then this must be good. It also was compared to The Raven Boys, or The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater, which is not my favorite series, but I did enjoy it. So I was intrigued to see how those two kind of came together and created The Devouring Grey, but I just didn't think it was anything insanely special. I think a big thing for me is that I really like connecting with characters, because if I don't care about the characters, I'm not going to care about what's happening to them. And I think that there were like 2 characters that I thought were interesting. I thought that their storylines were very interesting, but the other 2, I was just kind of meh about. I didn't think that their storyline was that interesting. And when we would get into their perspectives, I found that I was kind of like zoning out because I was listening to the audiobook, which I admit might be part of my problem. I do find that sometimes with audiobooks, I can get quite distracted, or my mind will just start to drift, and then I've missed the past like 5 minutes and I'm kind of confused, which did happen with this book, but I do think that a part of it was just that I didn't care. I wasn't as interested or invested in the story as I would be with some other audiobooks. So I don't know. I think maybe if I read it physically, I might feel different, but as of right now, it was just a very average book for me. I do believe that there's going to be a sequel, and maybe I'll check it out when that comes out, but I'm not going to be like running out to pick up a copy and to read it, but who knows. But yeah, it was just kind of disappointing because of how much I heard people talking about it. I was really hoping that I would love it, especially with the comparisons to some other things that I really enjoy, but sadly it wasn't my favorite. So the next book I have is a sequel to a book I believe I read last year, and that is The Everlasting Rose by Danielle Clayton. So The Bells was kind of a pretty popular book. I feel like a lot of people were discussing it around the time that it was being released. I think that there was a lot of sponsored content with it, which is fine. It's great, actually. I 100% support the sponsored content. But I think because so many people were talking about it and so many people were either being sponsored or just reading it and talking about it, I wanted to pick it up, and I read The Bells and I really enjoyed it. I thought the world was really interesting. I thought the characters were interesting, and the way that The Bells kind of wrapped up, I was so intrigued to know where it was going to go. So I kind of ran out, bought The Everlasting Rose. I didn't start it immediately after it came out, but I was really excited to get to it when I finally did. But sadly, I was pretty disappointed in this one. So I think the thing with this is I was so intrigued to know what happened after The Bells ended, where things left off and where the characters were going. I was so intrigued to see where it went, how they were going to get out of the situation that they got into. And this just... Hold on, let me try to collect some thoughts and say actual words. So basically with this book, they're kind of on the run. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil anything for people, but the characters are kind of trying to escape and stay undercover. I think one of the things that was kind of bothersome with this book is that when every time the characters would be put in a situation where they were almost caught or they should have been seen, there was always some way that they got out of it. There was always something or somebody there to save them and get them out of the situation. And it happened like multiple times throughout this book. It basically was just like, okay, they go to the next place. They almost get caught. Oh, they're saved. On to the next place where they almost get caught. But oh, they're saved. It just kept going. That was like the whole book, basically. The whole like first half of this book, I think. It just was the same thing over and over and over again. And it didn't make me feel like there was any real consequence or real, like it wasn't very high stakes, if that makes sense. So yeah, it just kind of was like every time they got into a situation, I wasn't concerned for them because I knew some way or another they were going to get out of it and it was going to be fine. Also, the ending of this book was really disappointing. I'm gonna try to not like get too spoilery, but basically this whole book, you know, something is going to happen at the end. Two characters are going to end up confronting each other. I feel like that's pretty vague, but you know that that's going to happen eventually, and you're kind of waiting this whole book to kind of get to that point. You get to that point and you don't even see the confrontation. You don't see it. Maybe you skip ahead like 10 or 20 seconds if you don't want to be spoiled, but if you don't care, continue to watch. So basically you're waiting this whole time for these two characters to kind of battle it out, and then the girl, the main character, ends up passing out or something. I don't even really remember. She passes out, and then you wake up in the hospital with her, and then the whole thing's fixed. And it's like you don't even see anything. Nothing even happens. There's no action. Nothing happens. And then it's just everything's fine, and you don't even see how it got to that point. So that was kind of frustrating that you're waiting this whole book for this one thing, and then you don't even end up seeing it happen. So I kind of got to the end of this book, and I was like, oh, that's it? But I do think that there is a third book coming out. I could be wrong, but I think that the way that this ended was a conclusion, but definitely open-ended enough where if Danielle Clayton wanted to come back and write a third book, she could. And I believe she is. Do not quote me. I could be completely wrong, but I'm pretty sure there is going to be a third book. Which, will I read? Maybe. I'm not going to rush out and get it like I did with this one. I was really excited to get my hands on this, but the third one I'm like not super, excited about if it ever comes out. The cat is running around the house right now. Oh no. I wonder if you can hear that on the camera. Oh my god. He's losing his mind. I definitely feel like I am interested in the third one just to see where it goes, but at the same time, I'm not like super excited about it, and I don't know. We're gonna have to see. If the cover for the third book is as beautiful as this one and the Bells cover, then maybe I'll just buy it because it's a pretty cover. You never know. So yeah, sadly I was disappointed in this because I was really excited to read this year, but it just didn't, live up to what I was hoping it would be. Okay, now we're gonna get into some books that I'm kind of scared to mention. So no one attack me if you enjoyed these books. I'm happy for you. I think the rest of these books, especially the next two, I was going into hoping I would love, and I just didn't. So let's get into it, and I hope no one yells at me. So the next book I have to mention is Wayward Son by Karvall. So this is the sequel to Carry On, and we are following a boy named Simon Snow, who is the chosen one. It's actually a very similar situation to Harry Potter. I think that was kind of a big inspiration. It's very much like Harry Potter? What just happened in my mouth? It's very much like Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy, like fan fiction, which that's fine. That's fine. I'm not even mad about it. So we are also following a boy named Baz, who is kind of like Simon's arch enemy and his rival throughout his entire school years. But as you can imagine, things start to change in Carry On, the first book in this now trilogy. It's a trilogy now. So this sequel was announced, I think, at BookCon or Book Expo or something last year in 2018. And then we finally got it in our hands, I think, in October. And I read it. I was very excited for this. I was so excited. I love Carry On. I think it's a great book. I really, really enjoyed it. So I was really excited to get my hands on the sequel. So I don't want to, get too spoilery because it is a sequel. But I do want to say that I do understand what Karvall was trying to do. I think it was really interesting to take the chosen one trope and then kind of have the after story. Like, we don't really get to see a lot of stories where it's the chosen one and what comes after that. We don't really see what kind of comes after everything that a chosen one goes through. We don't get to see their life afterwards, and I think that is what this book's trying to do, and I thought it was really cool, and I was really excited for it. But the thing with this was I just feel like the plot, what was the plot? So I think like 2/3 of the way into this book was when the plot actually kind of started to happen. I know these books are more character driven and more about the characters, which if I didn't love the characters as much as I do, I don't even think I would have finished this book because I just really care about these characters. I love these characters, but I don't know. The plot was kind of strange. There really wasn't a plot until like 2/3 of the way through, and then it was like, oh, this thing that we mentioned at the very beginning of the book, it's back now, and now we have to figure it out. So let's go for the next third of the book and figure that out. It just seemed really strange. Like, I just feel like the pacing was sort of off, and it was like there was no plot, and then all of a sudden the plot was happening, and it was happening in the last like 100 pages of the book. It seemed to happen way too quickly. Also, I feel weird mentioning this because I understand why Simon Snow was having a hard time dealing with everything that had happened to him, and he was having trouble kind of figuring out his feelings and communicating with not only everybody else, but with himself, honestly. Like, he was having a hard time trying to figure out where he was at, he was going through a lot. So I understand why him and Baz were sort of having this miscommunication. They both thought that the other was not into each other anymore, that they were going to break up with each other, which is sad, and we don't want that. But here's the thing. They're on a road trip from Chicago, I believe, to LA, and they didn't find any time to talk to each other in that whole time, especially because the first 2/3 of this book, nothing happened. Like, you couldn't have maybe started to have a conversation earlier on in this book. Like, I know you probably wanted to wait until the end of the book to have that resolution, to have, their problems resolved, but you couldn't talk at all in that, the first 2/3. Maybe I'm being a bit too harsh because I understand why they were having trouble talking, especially Simon, but at the same time I was like, that nothing's gonna happen at all in the first half of this book. Then I checked Twitter, and the same day I finished Wayward Son was the same day that Karvall announced that there was going to be a third book. So I'm very glad that I didn't finish this and then have to wait to find out that there was going to be a third book. I literally found out the same day I finished, because if this had ended the way it ended and there wasn't a third book and I didn't know that there was going to be a third book, I would have been so confused. But I still have hope for the third book because I feel like where everything kind of ended with the characters and where they're going to be going, I'm feeling like I'm going to enjoy the third book a lot more. Maybe I'm hyping up the third book too much in my head, because I think that was a big part of why I was disappointed in this. I think I hyped it up too much. I had certain expectations. I had certain, ideas of what it was going to be, and it wasn't any of those things. I definitely think that that was a big part of why I was disappointed. I think it really had to do with myself, and not necessarily the book, but there were things in the book, obviously, that made it disappointing. But hopefully I'm not hyping up the third book in the trilogy too much, because I definitely think that there is a way that I will love that again, and hopefully this book just was, the struggle middle book. I feel like sometimes books in the middle of trilogies can struggle a little bit, and that's fine. So maybe that's the case with this. But I am hopeful for the third book, and I don't know, maybe if I reread this knowing what I was going to get, maybe I would enjoy it a bit more. I just think that a big part of it was I had certain expectations going into it, and it was just completely different. I'm like sweating because I'm like so like stressed that people are going to be upset with me. But I do want to say that I gave Wayward Son, I think 3 stars, 3 or 3.5. I can't remember. I didn't dislike it. I just definitely was disappointed, and it wasn't as good as Carry On. So that's kind of how I had to rate it, but I definitely didn't dislike it. It just was disappointing. Hence the title of this video. Okay, so I have to like stretch it out to get ready for this next book. So the next book I'm going to mention is Red Scrolls of Magic by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. I am so sad that this is on this list because I love Cassandra Clare. I don't know if you can see it. Oh yeah, you can kind of see it. I have like a whole shelf of like all of her books. I like Cassandra Clare. I like her books. I like her world. This book, however, was a little disappointing. I gave this a 3 stars, so not a bad rating. I didn't dislike it, but it definitely was not what I was expecting. So I think the biggest thing as to why I was disappointed in this book is definitely has to do with me and my personal preferences. So Cassandra Clare's The Mortal Instrument series, the main series, the one that kind of starts it all off, is my least favorite Cassandra Clare series. I much prefer the Infernal Devices and the Dark Artifices trilogies, but the main Mortal Instrument series are my least favorite books by her, which is so weird because I have the need to reread them like all the time, but yet I don't love them as much as her other books. I don't know, I can't explain it. But the thing with this book is we kind of go back to the middle of the Mortal Instrument series. I think this takes place in between the 3rd and 4th book in the series, so we're jumping right back into the middle of the series, and for me, it just was kind of like, oh, okay, so we're back at this series that I don't necessarily love. But the thing is, I love Magnus. Magnus is one of my favorite characters throughout all of Cassandra Clare's books, and I love Malik. I love Magnus and Alec together, so I was happy and excited to read a book just about them. But I think one of the things with this book was that because we jumped right back into the middle of the Mortal Instrument series, there is that thing that kind of happens between Magnus and Alec that I think is in the 4th book, end of the 4th book. It's been a long time since I've read these books. I can't remember if that's exactly right, but there is a thing that happens between them where they kind of have a disagreement, to say the least. Like, that is like the most vague thing that I could say. But I feel like we're jumping into the world right before that happens, and I just feel like it's kind of strange because I feel like we have development with these characters and their relationship, and then with the timeline of we have this development and then that happens in the books, it's just kind of like, oh, it just kind of seems like it doesn't necessarily flow into the timeline correctly or well, in my opinion. I definitely think that there were like hints to what was going to happen, especially in the 4th book. I think it's the 4th book in the Mortal Instrument series between them. But I also feel like there were moments where I was like, this Alec and this Magnus would not have this fight in the 4th book. So it doesn't feel like it slides into the timeline as well as I would have thought. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say. I did like seeing more of Magnus and Alec, and I'm definitely intrigued for the rest of the trilogy. I think it's a trilogy because I'm interested to see if we're going to follow them later on. I think I would enjoy a book about them that follows them after the Mortal Instrument series ends and kind of where they go from there. I think it would just be kind of cool to see them after the Mortal Instrument series because it's just not a personal favorite when it comes to Cassandra Clare's books, but I don't know, I'm very interested to see where they go. I did think that the writing with Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu was wellly weaved together. I think a big thing was just that I've read so many Cassandra Clare books that I could tell when it wasn't her, but I think for the most part it was pretty well done and pretty well integrated together. I also think another thing was why it was disappointing was just because I read Queen of Air and Darkness before this, and then this was the next release, and I feel like going from the monster that was Queen of Air and Darkness and having her writing be where it was in Queen of Air and Darkness to this just was a little weird, because I think something that they kind of did was make the writing kind of be able to fit into where her writing was in the Moral Instruments series, if that makes sense. Like, obviously, her writing has improved over the years, but I feel like it would have been weird if she wrote this book as if she was writing it as a book that was coming out in 2019. She wanted it to kind of be able to fit into the Moral Instruments series in the timeline where it wasn't, without it being, like, completely weird for a reader to read. Does that make sense? I don't know. I feel like this video is kind of a mess, but it's fine. I don't know if that made sense, but I just feel like the writing was it was weird to get used to because I was so used to reading Queen of Air and Darkness, which was the most recent release before this one. It just was a bit weird to go from one extreme to the other. So yeah, I definitely didn't love this as much as some of her other books, but I do know that a big reason why I was kind of disappointed in it was just a personal preference of me not loving the Moral Instruments series as much as her other books, so to go back into the middle of the series was a bit odd for me personally. I'm sure there were a lot of people that were really happy to get back into the main series because that is a series that started it all, but for me it was just, I don't know, it was just fine. I'm excited for the rest of the trilogy. I hope that it just gets better from here on out. Okay, now we are on to the book that is more than disappointing. I really just did not like it. So the books so far, I've at least enjoyed. They haven't been bad books. They haven't been books I've hated. They've just been disappointing for one reason or the other. But this book I really didn't like. I think I originally gave this book a 2 stars, but I feel like it might be a 1 star, which is weird because I barely give books 1 star. I barely give books 2 stars. I need to get better at my whole rating system thing. Let me just tell you what book it is. I don't actually have a physical copy, so I'll put a picture up on the screen, and that is Once and For All by Sarah Dessen. I read her books in middle school and I really enjoyed them. She was one of like my favorite authors then, and so when I saw that she was kind of still releasing books, I wanted to give her a try again just because I feel like my reading tastes have changed a lot since middle school and early high school, and just kind of the things I like and the things that I maybe wouldn't have noticed in books before, I notice now. So I wanted to give her another try. So I think this book came out last year in 2018. I think she did come out with a new book this year, but I saw this one on the Libby app and I actually read it as an ebook. So I just wanted to try it out, see if I felt the same way. Spoiler, I didn't feel the same way I used to. So this follows a girl whose name I can't remember, and her mom owns a wedding planning business with her best friend. And the main girl kind of works for her mom. I don't know if she works for her all year round or just in the summer, but she does work for her, and it is taking place over the summer vacation. So then there is a young woman who comes in to get her wedding planned by them, and she has a younger brother who kind of just gets into mischief, kind of gets in trouble a lot, is kind of always causing a ruckus or a problem. So what they end up doing is having him work for the wedding planning business for the summer to hopefully kind of get him under control, teach him some responsibility. So this boy, whose name I can't remember, Luna is the girl's name, Ambrose. That's what it is. I was like, it's like a boy's name that was in another book. So I just looked up the names so that this would be a little easier. So the main girl's name is Luna, I believe, and then the boy's name, who's kind of always getting into trouble, his name is Ambrose. Naturally, just because you're reading a book that is a contemporary, that is a love story, you know that these two are going to end up together. The only reason you know they're going to end up together is because that's just the way that the book's gonna go. It's not like you don't know that that's where it's gonna end up. So these characters kind of do this thing where they make a bet, and she has to kind of date around because she was in a relationship, didn't end well, which I will get to. She doesn't want to really date anymore, so he challenges her to kind of date around and date a lot of people, no strings attached, just kind of date around. And then she challenges him to date one person, and that's it. He's used to dating around and dating a lot of girls, but he has to just date one person for the time of the bet. I feel like it's going to be really hard for me to avoid spoilers for this book, so if you don't want to be spoiled for this book, maybe just know that I really just didn't like it, and now you can leave the video. But if you don't care about being spoiled, hello, let's continue. So basically, this girl, Luna, she was in a relationship with a boy who was sadly killed in a school shooting. That was something that I wish that I had known going into this book that was going to be discussed. I feel like I'm somebody that feels like there should be content warnings on books. I know that that was kind of a discussion on book Twitter, like especially yesterday. We have content warnings for everything else, why not for books? And it was a bit like surprising to first read about. The first mention of a school shooting was the main girl and her best friend were shopping for dresses, and at the store there was TV on and they were, covering a school shooting that had happened, and I was just like, this seems really random, and I wasn't really prepared for it. And then I was fine because I knew that that was going to be a discussion. I just wish going into it that I had known. And I feel like there's certain people that might want to know going into a book that that was going to be something that was discussed. But that was kind of like the least of my problems. I feel like I could get over that. But I feel like one of the things is that these characters are going to end up together. Luna and Ambrose are going to end up together just because that's how it was going to work. I mean, books can be predictable, and it's about like how they get to that point. And I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing, but I just feel like there was no chemistry or connection between these two characters other than the fact that you knew they were going to end up together. So because I knew that they were going to end up together, I was like searching for some sort of connection between them, but there just wasn't really anything. But the thing that I didn't like about this book was that there was some cheating going on. So towards the end of this book, she ends up dating a boy that isn't Ambrose. And he's a nice boy. Nothing wrong with him. He doesn't do anything wrong. He just is her boyfriend and is a nice boyfriend. But she knows that she is not into him. She doesn't like him the way that she should like her boyfriend. But then she continues to date him and doesn't break up with him, but knows that she doesn't care for him and doesn't want to be with him. So she invites her boyfriend over. He gets there. She finds out some information that might be about Ambrose. So she runs off to try and find him because she does actually care for him and not her boyfriend. So she runs off to see him. They see each other and they start making out. Do you not have a boyfriend sitting at your house right now, sister? I don't know. Just seemed kind of messy to me that she was making out with some boy that she actually liked while her boyfriend that she doesn't care about but is still dating and not breaking up with at her house. I just didn't enjoy that part of it. I really get annoyed when that type of stuff happens in books. I don't like the low-key cheating, but it's okay because it's the characters you want to be together. I just don't enjoy that. I don't think that that is okay. Just because it's the characters that you want to be together doesn't mean that this person cheating on another person is okay. But yeah, I don't know why. I kind of realized I was getting kind of heated while I was talking about this and had to tone it down. So hopefully I didn't get too aggressive because I just don't really like this book. I don't. The only thing good about this book is the cover. The cover is beautiful. I originally gave it 3 stars and then went, why did I give it a 3 star? Lowered it to a 2, but I feel like at this point maybe I should lower it to a 1 because didn't really like anything about it. So yeah, that's kind of how I felt about Once and For All. I don't think I will be reading any more Sarah Dessen in the future because I would like to, remember the books that I read from her when I was younger that I loved and remember loving them. I don't want to continue to read her newer books and just completely ruin that. And I really didn't enjoy it, so I don't see why I would enjoy other ones. So yeah, I didn't like this book as much as I was hoping to, but oh well, that's gonna happen. Okay, so we've made it to the end of this video, and I feel like I kind of was ranting at some points and not making a whole lot of sense. So I'm sorry if you made it through this messy video. Thank you. I also hope that this video wasn't too negative. I feel weird talking badly about books, but I feel like a lot of these books I genuinely still liked. I just was disappointed in them. How many times have I said I still like them? I was just disappointed. I'm trying to make my message clear. So let me know down below if you read any of these books, if you felt the same, if you felt differently. I'd love to know. I really was hoping to love a lot of these books. That's why it's so disappointing that I didn't love them. So that is going to complete this video. Thank you if you made it to the end of this very ranty, messy video. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe down below if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Oh my god, that was the most stressed I've ever been filming a video. I don't like being negative. Will I continue to do these videos in the future after this experience? We'll see.